thank you all for being here where we're talking about human stuff instead of in the other two rooms where they're talking about AI. I know it's a big draw, so thanks for being here with me. You've seen this slide all day long. I don't know why things aren't moving. You've seen this slide all day long. I'm going to, since we're at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you something other than just, hey, thanks for the sponsors. I'm going to say, do the right thing and thank them publicly. I've seen all of us exchanging LinkedIn, so I know that you got LinkedIn accounts. Go online today and say, thanks for making this thing possible. Somebody who runs events, which I'll talk about in just a second, I know how important getting those sponsors things out there so that they go, this was worth our time and effort. So we're going to do it again next year. And I don't know about you guys, but I had a great time today. I want to come back next year, and these sponsors make it happen. So thanks to them. Tell them thanks in public. Before I forget, if you want the slides from today, if you want to talk more, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want a longer version of this session, I'm hosting it on April 30th, and you can register on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn's up there. And as a side note, I run a free virtual event just for fun for people in the product community, success support, basically all the customer centricity disciplines. It's a virtual once a month event where I send out boxes of snacks to everybody, and it's 5 people, so it's a nice, fun cone of silence conversation to talk about all the things that might be on top of your mind. A little mini version of this. So if you're interested in that, sign up there. Again, if you forget about it, just find me on LinkedIn and I'll send you the URL again. So today, we're going to talk about a topic that is close to my heart as a community guy. But it all starts with this quote that a buddy of mine, who's a senior product designer at Whirlpool, told me a couple, well, I think it's been almost a year ago now, but when he was saying, you know, it'd be devastating to design a product and then discover later that customers hate using it. And for months after that, he just kind of dropped that in conversation. We were talking about kind of what we were both up to. And there was something about that quote that really stuck out to me. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I realized some number of weeks or months later, it kind of dawned on me. My question back to him that I meant to ask was, why didn't you know in advance that they were going to hate it? What are you doing that's in the black box of product development that dissociates you so much from knowing how that product's going to be received, that you're designing it not knowing one way or the other how effective it's going to be really. And now, I know that you never quite know how a product's going to hit. Some of them go crazy, some of them don't go as crazy as you think they are, but not knowing that they're going to hate it is a weird thing for me as a community guy, right? Somebody who spent a lifetime connecting with people. And yeah, you know, there's all these challenges that we go through as product developers of some sort. There's all these issues that we deal with and challenges that we come across in trying to figure out if our products are going to be successful, if our products are going to get out the door on time, right? You know, everything from you know, are the marketing costs going to be in place? Is the community resistance going to be high for whatever set of reasons, right? We were just talking in the last session about, you know, sunset products and getting them off the books, but you know, what happens is not selling very well, but the people who it is selling to are highly passionate about it. What do you do when version 2 comes out, right? You know, quality challenges, understanding customer needs, misinterpreting your data because you just didn't quite understand, or you chose option A and option B on your interpretation and it would just happen to be wrong. No fault, just some of the challenges, right? And over the years of working with product teams, and I'm going to keep pointing to you because so much of this references what you were talking about, right? That there's this process mindset that we take all this messiness, all this messiness, and we start thinking, well, I need a process for this. If I add a process, if I organize it, if I get structure in here, problems are going to be solved. Everything's going to result in a better outcome. And that's absolutely true sometimes, but not always, right? And process itself doesn't get us where we need to be. Process itself will organize the messy. It doesn't solve the problems that we're really trying to solve with that organization, right? If I'm feeling a little stressed at home and my house is a mess, cleaning the house makes me feel a lot better, but whatever was stressing me out still exists, right? I still have to deal with that issue. And we know that this is true in the product world because we've probably all heard this stat that, you know, 30,000 new products released every year and 95% of them fail. So no matter how much process we're adding, something's still not going right. And I got an idea of at least part of what may be going wrong. And I think it's that we have a pretty hardcore separation between the customers that we're designing for and the black box of product development, right? Everybody has a black box of product development to some extent. You can't design products completely in public. But over time, the risk abatement, the overall issues with team structure, with resources, all this stuff has kind of compressed us into this black box being almost impenetrable until we launch the product, right? Until it's out there in the world. But of course, we all know that little small decisions made all along the way make big impacts, right? So in the first week, when you say A or B, it has impact that may not show up until 6 months later, for the most part, right? I do think that there's a way to see those things earlier, but we first have to get away from this idea that in that black box magic happens, right? Yeah, sometimes putting the engineers in a sequestered space with the product management team and whoever else might be stakeholders can result in some really cool things, right? We've all heard the story about how the Macintosh was designed and the pirate flag flying off campus, innovation center of whatever that building was called. But it kind of that creates this mindset that if we create these impenetrable black boxes, magic's going to happen because everybody's protected. We've got clarity of what we're doing. I don't know. I don't know that that's always true. And more often than not, I don't think it's true. Partially because there's a 3-step process that if we take product management and simplify product development and simplify it really hardcore, we've got a collection process up front typically, right? Where we're doing our research, we're getting our customer input, we're going to our colleagues and saying, hey, on the sales team, what works? What are people asking for? And we collect all this stuff up, right? And we get it bundled up in our bag, and we jump into that product development black hole, the black box, for some number of weeks or months, and then pop out and go, ta-da! Here's our product. And then it hits the verification stage, right? We've been working so sequestered for so long. Now we're going to put it in front of some people and see what they think, right? That's when we do our beta testing. We may do more customer research. We may be doing all kinds of quality aspects. And then we're all surprised when it misses the mark, right? And it doesn't quite work. Or even weirder, when it works really well and we have no honest idea why, right? There is no reason you should be surprised by these things. The speed, the direction of how things go, sure, maybe that's surprising. We all know that there's stuff that you never thought in a million years was going to be as big as it was. But that's different than not knowing it was going to be unsuccessful, not knowing that it was going to be successful, right? And that's a bookends process. But we're getting this customer input at the bookends, the very beginning and at the very end. In the meantime, we're so much smarter than them. We know so much more than them. We're good, right? I don't buy it. The 95% number tells us we shouldn't be buying it, right? So what's missing? Very simply, I think it's the voice of the passionate customer. When I say passionate customer, I mean, I'm a community guy, so it can be community members, right? People that are part of an existing support community or fan community, something like that. I worked for Lego for a long time, right? There was a lot of adult fans that were actively part of a community, and we'd pull voices out of there. But even when I worked for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, in their patient base, they had people who were influential, right? That when we talked to them specifically, they did a really good job of representing the experience they were having, right? They were, in a way, a passionate customer, right? They had a lot of input to give. So where are those people? They don't tend to show up except in the bookmarks, right? Very beginning, very end. And I think that the solution to a lot of what I'm talking about as problems is this idea of giving them a seat at the table, right? Opening up that black box to invite them in. And we'll talk about how in a second. That's the big part of this, because I know everybody just now went, that's fine, that's fine. We're gonna talk about that. It's a very simple switch, conceptually anyway, from the bookends to an ongoing process, right? How do we create not just a research activity up front, a verification activity at the end? How do we create a programmatic approach to getting people involved all along the way, right? And the idea is that we're trying to reduce the element of surprise because we've got those voices present throughout. They're telling us right up front, I don't know, that seems weird. It's not the way I use things, right? We don't have to stop and test against that. They're telling us as we go. We're literally giving them a seat at the product development table. And again, like I said a second ago, I heard you all go, because if we're honest, when I talk about that process, our minds go straight to the episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets the ability to go design a car, and they release it at the car show on the stage, and it blows up in a ball of fire, right? Because he had every feature in there. They basically turned over the project to him and said, you don't know what you're doing, but here you go. And I swear, when I give this conversation or this presentation to product people, that is straight where their mind goes. If we include them, we have to turn it over to them. Nonsense. We do not. Any more than if we ask one of our colleagues to come join us and sit at the table, that we go, okay, we've invited you in the room, now the room's yours, I guess we just work for you now. Nonsense, right? We get somebody in from the sales team and we say, hey, what are you hearing? They are a member, a partner in that process, right? Same way here. I'm going to tell a story about Lego here in a second, but you know, these were three of the people that I invited in for one of my all-time favorite projects of the community-driven product development nature. But these were who we were talking about, right? John and Ralph and Dave were three of the four, and have a picture of Steve. They were the people that we invited into that project, and one of them's a mechanical engineer, one of them was a software engineer, and one of them was a guy that did absolutely amazing in-person events in his free time, right? These were people who were smart, intelligent, people who, I mean, Ralph went on to work for Lego, right? These were literally people that could work for the company. Not just random people giving random advice. They were people who were smart, and they were people who represented the communities they came from. I could put them in front of the product team, and they worked, right? It took me 3 months to find 4 people. I mean, 3 almost full-time months of searching and finding the right people to put in, that the product team would connect with, that the community, when we launched and said, hey, we got input from these guys, they went, oh yeah, okay. I mean, I wanted to be in that program. That sounds like a lot of fun, but that's fair. If those guys are smarter than me, I'm glad you picked them, right? These are who we're talking about. In this process, I keep talking about it's a process, it's a program. It's one that I call community-driven product development, right? It is a means of building programs that are programmatic, are strategic, are well-planned, and it really is based on 4 very easy things. Finding the right people, putting them in the right time, focused on the right outcomes, using the right activities. Simple as that, right? We are finding the right people, people that really match with our team, match with the needs that we have, can communicate credibly with our product team, and putting them in at the right time. There's a process to, actually, let me come back to that in a second. There's a program process. If you want to hear more about this, join the full session on the 30th, but you know, we're building programs, right? It's not just process, it is program. It is, you know, how do we get humans to connect and interact with other humans in an effective way that gives us the outcomes we want. We can talk more about that later if we've got questions on it. But, you know, designing these programs, back to finding the right people. What is the right people? Might be 4 people at the beginning, just to do a 1-day ideation session, to put them in the room at a time when the product development team, executives, our colleagues around the company, whoever it might need to be, hears, oh, wow, yeah, that is an interesting point. I see the perspective. It's not just cold research on a piece of paper. It's people standing in front of me that I can interact with, we can have conversations at the right time, right? So we may have big groups at the actual development cycle. We may have even bigger groups at a you know, post development testing cycle. We may have very small numbers, right? You can see in the full project could be 5 to 50, right? It just depends on what we're actually trying to achieve. In very big programs that last a long time, I may not want to have 40 people for a year and a half. I may want to only have them for 6 weeks. I may want to have 5 people that leads to 10, to 5 more, a total of 10, over a course of 6 months. We design these things, right? And we design them based on a bunch of different questions. We ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve here? How are we going to go about doing this? Who are the representative voices? When we put them back into the customer base, the community base, how are they going to say, oh, I had this great experience that was so wonderful, and I got asked the right questions, right? How do we put that back out there? So we're not just getting good stuff for us, we're also giving back, right? It's this, right? What I've spent 20 plus years doing community development, talking about my mantra is everybody goes home happy, right? That we both have to understand what the value is for both sides of that equation, right? I as the company have to really understand and can communicate. I know you're here and kicking in, volunteering your time because whatever. In turn, I need the following, right? A lot of people believe that it's all about sort of whoever we bring in. No, it's me saying, I need somebody who can really represent the voice of the customer. I need somebody who can really tell us in an honest way what we're doing wrong, but I need it to be credible, right? Whatever it might be. And very quickly, I want to make sure we got time for questions too, but Lego Mindstorms was a great example of one of these kind of programs. We had a Lego Mindstorms 1.0 that had been on the market quite a while, been on the market 10 years. In technology terms, 10 years is a lifetime, and there had been 0 updates to that other than a few software things along the way, but the hardware itself hadn't changed in 10 years. We had a huge, huge base of enthusiastic people around the globe that loved this stuff. And a lot of our adult fans had spent tens of thousands of dollars, no joke, on buying the stuff for this particular hobby, right? So I hear from the product team, hey, great news. We've just kicked off this top secret project to design 2.0. And I went, excellent, tell me about it. Oh yeah, it's gonna have all this new great stuff. Very cool. I like it. How are you gonna prioritize which one of those sets of options for the sensors and technology and features? How are you gonna prioritize that? It sounds like a lot. We all know roadmaps depreciate over time as you develop. What's the order there? We've got some thoughts. Okay, how does that influence from the community? Who uses this stuff in a hardcore way? Well, we don't really know. Cool. What's the backwards compatibility? There is none. It's a consumer grade product. It's a low price point, primarily meant for children ages 12 plus. We're not going to worry about it. And I said, okay, let me tell you what you can expect. You can expect pitchforks and torches at the gates the moment that you launch. The moment you launch. Not only will it impact this particular business and line of business, it will impact the entirety of the relationship we have with the adult fans. Because they don't buy just this separately from everything else they buy. They have a relationship with us as a singular company. Oh, wait a minute. We don't want that. What do? We found Ralph and John and Dave and Steve and brought them in and said, here, work with these guys. Ask them questions. And we had activities along the way that we built so that there was stuff for them to do. Until the inevitable point at which the product team said, well, that's really quite helpful. Can you give me more information? 100% of these projects in my career have started with the product team saying, we don't need help. And 100% of them have ended with them saying, this was fantastic. Can we transfer them to the next thing we're working on? Don't let them go. We can't let them go. No, we're not going to stop doing this, right? There's resistance, but it's over. And again, these are the folks that we're using, right? They really were part of that product development. If you look back at the bones of that product, John was submitting mechanical engineering designs, right? Ralph was submitting code snippets. Dave was calling out things that wouldn't work in events and things like First Lego League, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but if you're not, look it up, it's fantastic. But they rely on this in a huge global scale. They rely on the Mindstorm stuff. And so he was really being attuned to how this thing was going to work in the marketplace, not just work technically. And I'll knock through a few myths. I want to give some time for questions. I think we have a few more minutes. this isn't just a marketing gimmick. This is a way to reframe how product development is done. Right? My favorite example lately is somebody told me recently that they have a SaaS product. They put this whole new feature in place. They launched it. There was no save button. Couldn't save it. You could put in mountains of data and then couldn't save it. So they went, that didn't get flagged anywhere in the process until it got released to the market. Something that if you had a program like this in place, they would have noticed in seconds. A second, not even multiple seconds. So the engineering team says, oh God, put in a ticket, fix that. Put a save button on it. It's a 13-step process. Where do they put the save button? On each one of those steps that each one of them took 20 to 60 minutes a piece to fill out. At the very end. So 3 seconds later, as soon as it's released, the user base comes back and says, I don't have 4 hours to do this all at once, ever. Can we put a save button on each step of those 13 steps? Oh, oops, right? And now think about, we all know how that process worked, how long it took, how much engineering time and process went into building it, testing it, speccing it, all that stuff. And they had to do it multiple times because they just weren't asking the people, because they didn't have them handy. The handiest way they had to do to access them was to launch it and find out later. But what a dumb way to go about it, right? Imagine you had a group of people that you could just turn to and say, hey guys, here's what we're launching. Tell us what you think. Boom, done, fixed. Noticed, right? These aren't marketing gimmicks. They are actually part of the process of development. It's not just another thing to do. There's value here. It's not just an unorganized, unstructured madness, right? You work with a program owner just like any other program. This is what I do for a living, as I help companies actually build these things, right? What's the structure? What are the daily and weekly rituals for how we keep people engaged? What activities, are we doing that are fun for them to come in and join? Whether it's talking to an engineer or we give them a bug scavenger hunt, right? Things that really get them excited to be part of the team, right? And it's fun. That has been the most amazing side effect of these programs is not only do you get better product quality business, we put our professor of business hats on and we say, these things are great. But beyond that, what's really cool about these programs is how good they are at rejuvenating interest in the product team. Because you're bringing excited people who love what you're doing, right? I go home and I tell my wife, hey, here's what's going on with me. And she goes, cool, I like it, that's great. And I come here and I talk to you guys and you guys are like, oh man, that is amazing. There's 5 things here you didn't even think about. I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's the same kind of thing. Imagine being on a product team where there's a bunch of people who are not directly connected to you, who have a different perspective, telling you how cool the stuff is you're working on. Right? It really creates joy in this process that sometimes gets lost. There's others. I want to make sure we have time for questions. If you guys have questions, if you are on a product team and want to talk about the assessment piece, or you just want to connect, you want to join CX sessions, you want to register for the webinar, there's the LinkedIn. That's the best way to get to me, or grab me afterwards and we'll talk more. But any questions? Jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm on the product marketing side, so I'm constantly thinking about the customer and then bringing some of that information back and saying, like, what are we thinking about X, Y, Z? But really my question is around, we do lighthouse programs today, so for like developing a certain aspect of a product or developing a new product, we'll get a couple customers in to try and help us with the ideation and testing all of that. Do you see that as like a separate entity of what we're talking about here today, or is there maybe somewhere where that also fits into this?
Yeah, very good question. And I want to answer 2 things. One you didn't ask and then the one you did. So from a product marketing standpoint, I said it's not a marketing gimmick. It doesn't mean it's not part of your marketing program, right? And I think that's a really important part of this, because what better way to say you're building day one advocacy, you're building a platform, back in that Lego example. I mean, when we launched this thing, we got a wire cover story out of it, right? Because of the way we were doing it. So it is marketing. It's just not a gimmick. Now, to your question, maybe. They may be part of the same type of customer advisory board or other programs that you have in place, or it may not be. The reason I say maybe is because a lot of people say, hey, we have a customer advisory board. We don't need this. Right? typical customer advisory boards are inherently separated from the development process, and they are still verification activities or collection activities. They're still part of the bookends. We have our people, we get them together quarterly. In some companies, you know, they're flying in SVPs, and you know, they have to sit in a room for 4 hours, and then they get to go play golf all weekend, right? Which I hate those. But whatever, they're still a type of customer advisory board. But those tend to be more about collection or verification. These may be a subset of that, just like not every of these is part of the community, but you definitely want to pull from the community into these. You may have some overlap in these programs of the people. But these, for me, the simplest way to think about it is these tend to be the indirect colleagues, right? Versus just sources of feedback, right? And all of this doesn't take away from anything else that anybody else, any other part of the business is doing. You may start to overlap, or you may start to reduce this to do more of something else, but they're inherently kind of different because you're trying to integrate. You're not trying to gain feedback from. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. Mike sort of answered that because I think the way I've seen it implemented is with the advisory council, which I don't think works. But my experience actually has been a bit opposite to what you said. Actually, the development team wants the customer. And theirs just became the issue is hard to find the right customer and to keep them engaged in that. That's the issue.
Yeah. So in both of those cases, the distinction between what I do for a living, what I'm talking about here, and why what you're talking about doesn't work is almost always because you're not treating it like a program. You're treating it like a one-off activity to get feedback still, right? Yeah, we want to put them involved directly with the product team, but the product team says, and I just talked to somebody literally yesterday, who was telling me, oh yeah, we went out, we did a customer visit. We went on site, they gave us 5 of their engineers, put them in a room, we talked to them, and then a month later, we followed up and said, hey, all that feedback you guys gave us, we implemented it, here's what it looks like. And they went, yeah, cool. And we couldn't really understand why they wouldn't engage. Well, you didn't treat it like a program, right? There's no relational connection over time, right? And there's no community building. As a community guy, right? I think about this in terms of community building. We're not building that connection. What happened was they went out and they got some really great feedback, and then they disappeared for a month. And they came back and said, we did what you asked. Is this what you asked? And they said, yeah. There's nothing left, right? When you go out and you do customer interviews, open questions, close questions, right? Open relational connections, close relational connections, right? It's when you don't have the right activities, and some of those activities can be fun nonsense, but you're not doing it on a regular basis. So you're not.
Is it like the actual customer is part of the team?
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
Contributing to that.
Yeah.
So, but finding the right people is where the key is.
Well, and again, programmatically, you go back and you figure out, what are we trying to achieve here? What do those people look like? What are our challenges? With the Lego example, one of the biggest challenges we had was that product team was saying there's absolutely nothing those outsiders could give us that we don't already have on the team. And I knew if I put in some over exuberant fans, they would just be like, these guys are kind of weird, they're too much, it's too much, I don't want them around. I knew I needed to get somebody who was very much like them. So when I put the 2 groups together, there was a natural fit, right? And that's why I did so much work to recruit them and why it took 3 months. That recruiting went from just kind of asking around, asking it within the community space, like, who's really good at this stuff? Just to hear what their answers would be. Not specifically because I was looking for names, it helped, but also because I wanted to hear what their natural first reactions were. Because at the end of this, I wanted to put those back into the community and have them go, hey, look what we did. And everybody kind of calmed down, because if I, as the company rep, said, here's what our choice was, there's all kinds of surface area for argument. If I put them back in, whole different discussion. So I wanted to know who their thoughts were indirectly, because it was all very, very hush-hush, very top secret, lots of NDAs. But then I started engaging with those 4 people. Hey man, what's going on? What are you up to? to see how they related. Right? This was the recruiting piece it was casting as much as it was recruiting, right? And that takes some work. It's part of the reason why, that's why I have a job doing this stuff, is because product teams, even if they were good at it, they have other stuff to do, right? They're busy with doing the work. They need somebody else to kind of run the program where, once a week we're doing a stand-up with the team, whatever stand-up means in that case.
So, obviously, the Lego world obviously has a very big just practical enjoyment aspect. I guess you talked about the volunteer aspect. So these folks who are involved with it are compensated in any way?
No, and well, so yes, but no. And I'll answer that. And if you have any other questions, feel free to grab me. They are always compensated, almost never, if not never in my history, almost never with money. They are compensated with ways to build their identity, with swag. I've always joked that within a community construct, people give up their firstborn for an event shirt with the date on it, right? You were talking about your 2019 shirt, right? You still remember that. If I had given him $20, he wouldn't remember that. It would have dissociated his connection to me. Right, exactly. And if I had given it to you and it had your name on it, oh my God, right? You'd remember that forever. You'd remember that moment. You'd remember who gave it to you. But it is about the access is something in and of itself that is beneficial. The identity, this builds me up and says, I can put it on my resume later on, or I can tell everybody in the group, in the passionate customer base, I was one of those people, right? Whatever it might be. We really think about those things, but we almost never pay.
Yeah, I was just thinking about I was thinking about different types of software, SaaS, different types of products that doesn't obviously have the name or the base like Lego or something. How can you get people to kind of give up that much time to be able to work?
You can if you think it through and you design a good program.
I can interject?
Yeah.
10 minutes before the next party starts on the other end, all the sessions are complete. And so whenever you guys are done in here, there's no rush so you guys can continue your Q&A, but we'll be gathering on the other end for door prizes, session voting, and other fun.
All right, thank you. Very quickly, I did a project with a company that makes mobile launch monitors for golfers. So when you're swinging into the net in the backyard and it's 5 feet away,
I love that.
yeah, you put it behind you and it tracks where it would have gone on a real course. Like you can look at it on your phone and go, oh, it hooked left, it hooked right. Here's all my stats, the head speed and the spin axis and all that stuff. We did it with them. We brought in 40 people at about the 80% mark of completion. So that one was fairly towards the end, but it was still early enough to make decisions. They discovered so they're at the 80% mark. The major design, the whole concept of this product is I have a device that connects with Bluetooth to my phone. That's the basis. They discovered within the first 10 minutes, and I'm not kidding, of some of them receiving and opening it, that the Bluetooth connection had trouble. And the developers kept saying, it's just them.
That you work with because they sound awful. I don't know. I don't know.
Consider yourself lucky then. So the product development team understood immediately. It was the Turkish developers that were having challenges with that, and some of the Turkish leadership that was having trouble. But yeah, so we can do it everywhere.
It just seems like if it's a hobby, it's easier to kind of grab people. I was just kind of curious.
You could look
Yeah.
at advocacy more on the after end for VMware used to do, well, they still do. VMware does it. They have virtualization, and those people are very into it. And because I was involved in the post after advocacy, and you couldn't find people, but I was they probably had a missed opportunity because I never saw them bring folks in on the product development side.
Or they do it once, and again, that's a research activity, not a relational activity.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question because a lot of this that you're talking about here is borrowing from community-based, and in healthcare we do a lot with community-based care. But it also kind of sounds almost like a panel activity. So did you marry some of those constructs together to create this program? I'm just kind of wondering how that worked.
Yeah, so I pull from anything that is a social dynamic with how humans can better interact with each other. There's some group therapy in here, right? There's all kinds of psychology, there's sociology, there's either anything that I've found in my career that will work to help people connect with each other. It gets spiced in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, the engagement part is really hard too. Like if you build a panel through this research, it's almost like you're having to give like certain polls and whatever to keep people engaged in the
Right.
panel. And we were doing it for different types of disabilities. So, so having enough people to have a certain group where you weren't asking for too much from people, there's lessons learned in that too. So it's like, you know, you want everybody to engage, you want to keep them in the panel, you spend all this time recruiting them and consenting them and whatever else you need to do, but also like how do you know, set expectations and manage and then give them something so that they feel like they're getting something for that time.
Yeah, and all those great questions. I know we're at the end of time. Those are the program design questions to actually figure out with the audience, with the need, with the team, all the social dynamics. How do we build something that'll work for everybody? But yeah, great summary. Thank you for ending on that. Well, thank you guys. Feel free to connect, and I'm happy to answer questions.